Care family. Welcome back. Are you guys hearing feedback?
Yes, I was getting a little bit of feedback.
Is that better?
It is.
Okay, we'll start this again. Okay, hello Naya Care family and welcome back. Goodness, great. Okay. Hello Naya Care family and welcome back. We're continuing our series with our amazing dad, and this time we're going to be talking about safety. And the way that we thought we'd talk about safety would be in the fashion that we're actually dealing with it in the different stages of our lives. So for example, you guys all know that I have 4 boys. The range is from 6 to 15. So I have other safety issues I am now more concerned about. And then Santi has a 3-month-old and Megan has a toddler on the loose. So let's kind of just start in the order about baby safety and infant safety. And obviously safe sleep is one thing that always comes up. So we will, if you go on our website, we'll have a PDF that shows you exactly about infant safety and what to do with it. But the next big topic, and so we won't dwell on that as much because since it's everywhere, is car seat safety. And I think that's one thing that people overlook or don't know how to do it. When we first got our car seat for our first little one, I remember bundling him up in it, but we didn't know how to adjust the straps. And so the poor boy was like squeezed in this, like it was a straitjacket for him essentially, because we couldn't figure out. And until we went to our pediatrician's office, they're the ones that showed us to be like, no, you just have to press that button to loosen the straps. So did you guys have anything about infant safety or car seat safety in particular? Or, one last thing, when I was doing my car, we didn't have all these options that you young parents have now. So how did you guys navigate all of that? Because that seems mind-boggling to me.
For me, I get kind of lucky because my stepdad is a paramedic. So I don't have the choice but to do it correctly because I have him in the back of my head constantly telling me how to even as an adult, how to properly be buckled in. So several weeks before we had our daughter, we installed the car seat and we actually had him come over and make sure that it was properly installed because he actually helped do installations when he was at the fire department. So we got kind of lucky with that. I still don't know how to install it. My husband has since figured out how to install it properly. I am hoping nothing ever happens to him because I'm never going to know how to install the car seat.
I hear you. Santi, how about you?
That's funny. So yeah, I left that to my wife. She picked out the car seat. She did her research, got some recommendations. She also was looking for something light so she could carry it. But the installation she then left to me, and we also went to the fire department here locally in Arvada, Colorado, and made sure that they checked it out. And my sister also has a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old, so we had her check it out. We were letting everybody check it out that could check it out just to make sure we got multiple points of view. So that was definitely interesting, right? That's before the baby comes. We were already driving around with a car seat ready to go. And luckily at the hospital, they showed us what you were mentioning, Dr. Patel, how to loosen it, because that's something, everybody checks to make sure it's installed. But then, when you actually have a baby in there, you got to figure out a few other things. So they showed us how to loosen it, how tight it should be, the pinch test, above the shoulder to make sure you can't pinch the strap so that that they're tight enough but not too tight. So it's definitely a more complex situation that I imagined with the car seat. I thought we just purchase it, install it, and that's that. But even as my wife was going through the research, I learned there were so many different car seats to choose from.
Oh,
well, ultimately we figured it out. Yeah, I'm definitely comfortable with it, and I think, like Megan mentioned, I think I'm a little more comfortable than my wife at this point.
I totally agree with all your points there. The comfort, my husband took over more of the charge with the comfort, but it was like I said, you guys have so many more choices out there, and to kind of find the right one, because it's the safety of your infant, you're just like, I'm bringing this child home. And also you have to make sure that, you spend your money wisely, that they can grow with the child as well. So, so then for car seat safety, obviously the law is in Colorado, 2 years backwards. And then most people recommend as long as your child allows it, to be facing backwards. And the car seats will start supporting that. The other little quick things about safety car seats, there is an expiration date because of the plastic. So please be mindful of that. So now that we're going to start with the stages, Santi, what is your biggest concerns now with safety now that you have a 3-month-old?
So I'll try to go in chronological order. I love the term Megan used to describe how we'll talk about it today, the generations of safety. So I'll try to keep it in chronological order. So first, obviously the car seat right before the baby's here, we had that installed and make sure it was done properly. Got a few people to review it. And after that, the whooping cough, the Tdap vaccine, as well as unfortunately nowadays the COVID vaccine was a big topic for us even before the baby was here. My wife's family's out of state, so traveling right now was also a concern. Even with the vaccines being out, obviously, like there's concern whether vaccinated people can carry the virus, whether they can, whether they can spread it, etc. So those two, I think, again, the whooping cough, which is not a normal conversation that you would have if, baby aside with friends and family. So that was a new conversation to make sure people had their shot. And also the COVID vaccine and just being careful with COVID. That was before baby was here, thinking about bringing him home, thinking about, friends and family wanting to meet him and visit. And honestly, till this day, most of our friends have not met our baby. Only my parents and my sister, who live locally in Colorado, met the baby. And then some of my wife's family who slowly have been traveling here to meet the baby as well. But, health concerns. So of course, sleeping and all that, I think we'll get into those topics a little later because they're definitely worth discussing in detail. But those two were new to me that I didn't really concern until much later in the pregnancy were those health concerns of the vaccines and COVID.
So as a new parent navigating all of this, how did you address that to your friends? Because I could just imagine having that be a kind of a difficult conversations for some particular friends that I have.
Yeah, and I think human nature, you try to avoid those difficult conversations. So what I found myself doing is really, I wouldn't approach the conversation unless someone was adamant about meeting or visiting us, right? Or meeting the baby. So at that point, I would bring up the conversation of the options are to get the Tdap vaccine and explain what the whooping cough is, and what I've learned of it. And also the COVID vaccine and just being careful with COVID and mask, etc. Or waiting a few months until the baby has the opportunity to get his vaccines so that, he's covered. And luckily, most of the people that were adamant about meeting the baby were also obviously open-minded and either already knew that they would have to do this or were open to doing it. And it's funny, one of my friends even ran out to Walgreens to get the Tdap vaccine and send me a picture of his Band-Aid afterwards because he was excited to meet the baby. But I let people more so open up the conversation, right? By wanting to meet the baby. I didn't approach people who were more so willing to wait to meet him, telling them that they had to run out and get their vaccines.
Megan, you had to encounter COVID right when it was starting with your little one. How did you navigate that conversation?
It was really difficult because I in general tend to be very fearful. I'm kind of known as the germaphobe of the family. I get teased quite a bit for it. so this couldn't have been like any closer to my worst nightmare if it tried. Um, and then being pregnant and having a new baby, it was definitely scary. Um, it was really hard because we didn't have a lot of family around. But the biggest person that wanted to see him was my parents. And my stepdad was exposed, based on his job as a paramedic. So that was definitely a concern for me. But it was also kind of a relief because I felt like at the same time, like he knew the risks and he knew how to be careful and he wouldn't have done something to put our daughter in danger. But my parents especially have been very good about being vaccinated, wearing masks, washing hands. They even made sure they had the flu shot last year. They're really good about adhering to what we're comfortable with. But even after those conversations, we even had some people that were exposed that didn't let us know till after they visited, which was very frustrating. So now we just ask a lot of questions, and going into COVID kind of coming back and with this variant, we've had to start having the conversations because my entire family is not vaccinated and we tend to be very close. And I've had to have the conversation that if it gets to the point where we feel uncomfortable again, we're going to be distancing ourselves from the unvaccinated family members, for our daughter's safety, or they can wear a mask around her just because she doesn't have the ability to be vaccinated. I mean, we're hoping that, breastfeeding is protecting her in some format, but there's still just not a lot to know on how protected she is. And I'm just not willing to risk it. But my husband has never gotten the flu shot up until we had the baby. And now he is a regular vaccine taker.
So interestingly, pertussis and the Tdap was reemerging, and those guidelines came out when I actually was training for pediatric residency. So for our audience, pertussis actually presents in less than 6 months, not as whooping cough, meaning that you're seeing your baby cough, but they actually present with lack of breathing, which is the medical term apnea. And I remember being in New Orleans, being in my LSU residency, and had to admit 2 kids, both babies, lessons. One was like a 4-month-old, one was a 5-month-old. And we thought it was in the winter, so obviously you go to RSV, but when it came back as pertussis, and my residency training was 2003 to 2000 or 2004. Sorry, I'm messing up the dates, but what I'm just trying to get at was it wasn't very long ago that we saw this. It was less than 20 years ago that we actually changed the guidelines for pertussis, and it was really interesting to see unveil in front of your eyes because of all what you were seeing. So that was kind of an interesting take on that. But I think science in real time, and I think that's what we're dealing with COVID, right? Science in real time, and people are seeing it more firsthand than ever. So now Santi, so now we have the baby stuff, and like you said, the vaccines and all of that. What's your next concern? Because I think that's going to lead into really nicely to what Megan's dealing with these days.
My next concern, I usually was not a concerned person, but since my wife was pregnant, I'm now all of a sudden concerned with everything. So I'm just laughing at the question. But from top of mind, what I would review as the top concerns right now, I'm terrified of choking, anything to do with choking, or and I know it's more common than I imagined. So that's something that's on the back of my mind. And obviously, the CPR classes we took, but they were virtual this year because of COVID following that conversation. So I don't feel like and I'm a hands-on learner. So I don't feel like, I got the hands-on experience of what a CPR, infant CPR course would give you. So that's definitely always on the back of my mind. And the other one is sleeping. I think we might dive deeper into this one, but not only sleeping, right? Because right now I think of sleeping as like at night, the way they sleep, whether, in the bassinet next to the bed. We have a pretty fancy bassinet that has like a swaddle attached to it. So at least it just gives me the peace of mind also that he's not going to be rolling around or anything like that. But also napping. So sleeping and napping. We used to, or mom more often than dad, after he was done feeding, he would fall asleep on her chest. And then sometimes mom would be tired and would start dozing off. And we know that's, child safety 101. Don't fall asleep while holding your baby. But we also read a little bit about that specific position of them sleeping on your chest, and how if they, turn their face towards you, their nose doesn't really have the bone or cartilage to stop them from completely blocking their airway. So that's another super scary fact that I guess, Dr. Patel, maybe you could speak to more, but going back to ignorance is bliss, right? As soon as I learned that, now I'm terrified every time the baby's napping or when mom's tired. I usually, since I work from home, I have the ability to just kind of hover when I can and make sure they're not both sleeping. And if mom's tired, just take them and put them in his bassinet, or maybe hold them for a little bit if I can. So those two, sleeping, napping, and choking, I would say are the top concerns right now, top of mind.
Megan, how did you deal with the choking? And then we'll dive into sleep.
So again, I got really lucky. I have taken CPR several times. I started taking CPR when I was younger because I used to babysit a ton. I also worked with adults with developmental disabilities. So I had trained for that as well then. So I did kind of like a refresher thing with my stepdad, I didn't do formal training, but just kind of a refresher on what you do. But I'm kind of with you, Santi, where I still had the practical, but I I feel like in the moment I would kind of panic, and I'd question myself, and I wouldn't know what to do. So I do worry about choking. But surprisingly, my husband actually worries about it far more than I do, and it could be because I'm home all the time with her. So I see how she eats food and the things she does, and I see like, oh, it'll be fine. She'll work this out, where he sees, crap, she might choke. So for me, I don't worry about it as much. I mean, it is there. I obviously watch for smaller things on the floor, things like that. When we started food, it was a little bit of concern. But I also kind of learned to trust her a little bit. I realized that when something was too big, she also realized that, hey, like, this is not going to work. I can't swallow this. And she'd actually pull that out of her mouth or try to get it out of her mouth. So I realized that some of that she could work out on her own a little bit. And it taught me to be a little less paranoid when it came to choking.
I'll add a little bit to that paranoia. In the first few weeks, any little noise that he would make, especially at night, if he could make really what would be a cute noise, but any little noise, I would jump up in bed and ask my wife if he was choking. I don't know why I had that phobia so bad. And now little by little, like Megan mentions, right, you get to know their noises and kind of just how they are when they're eating or when they're, sneezing or sleeping. So now I'm much more calm and composed when it comes to any little noise. I haven't got to the milestone of eating solid food yet, or crawling around, right? So what Megan was mentioning about making sure there's nothing small on the floor that they could get to, or eating solid foods. I'll have to come back and let you guys know how my paranoia is doing at that point.
Definitely.
I mean, yeah, I agree with Megan. It's like, it's more of watching and allowing your kids to explore, and you offer the best abilities that you can, but really starting to get to know them. And do remember, coughing is a reflex that they're protecting themselves. So parents usually get really scared when their babies are coughing and then mistaken that as choking. But the mechanism of coughing is protecting your airway. So that's actually a good thing. And then you can adjust adjust whatever they're doing. And Santi, I have to say this also, like when your little one grows up a little bit more I mean, they can choke on a teether sometimes, it feels like. So they have it in their mouth, and all of a sudden, because of all that saliva that's built up, and they start just coughing on that. And again, like reiterating, a lot of parents confuse coughing as choking. So, but coughing is literally, it's a defense mechanism for the body. So it's a good thing.
I'm nervously smiling with that fun fact you just shared.
No, it is a voyage. I mean, it is on our, hopefully in the fall, we actually have started a series for introduction of baby food and developmentally and all of that good jazz. And just to have parents understand the knowledge about developmentally when to introduce food. And that's your biggest source of if they're going to be choking or not. And that's usually around 6 months. So you have a couple months left to go. But you know, being cautious is with everything. The minute you become a parent, the light bulb switches in your head. Your mindset just switch, and you just want to make sure that everything around this little one is the best to its abilities and the safest to its abilities, so your little one can grow and thrive. So your concerns, I think, are not, they resonate through all parents, and particularly new parents. And, you know, I'm sitting here fortunate to have 4, but I will tell you, every single time experience does create more comfort in some regions, some ways. And in some ways it's, you get too comfortable with certain things, but you do learn. So you do learn. Yeah. Let's dive into sleep, guys. So Santi, you started with the sleep. Megan, do you want to add? So Megan and I have to be totally open. We've had a lot of conversations on sleep, and there's 2 aspects of sleep. One is the sleep training, and then one is the sleep environment. And Megan knows my stance on this. You cannot sleep train a baby. You can sleep cue a baby. And what's that difference is that when you're training something, you want it to do and respond to the same cues, the same time, every single time. They have to do it this particular way. You can definitely train, like you train your dog to go outside and pee and do it. And training can lead into good habits and behaviors. But unfortunately, what happens in the first year is babies change a lot. So what you want them to do is you want to create an environment where they're starting to recognize that, you know, this is the same place they sleep every single time. But you know what? When they're 6 months old and the weather's nice and you want to go out, it's okay once in a while to be like, I want to go out with my baby, and I might want to skip my nap for that day and then have a bigger nap in the evening, or however. But the training, when people train their babies, they become so just too much into the schedule, I feel, that it doesn't allow them to have a little bit of maneuvering. So that's my one stance on sleep training. I really prefer sleep cueing. And what that means is, again, same environment, same thing. I think I've told you both guys, eat, play, sleep is what I kind of go along with, is babies eat, babies play for a little bit, and then they sleep. And as your babies get older, you see that pattern occurring, and that's what the pattern is. The other thing is that when babies are crying at night, or Santi, like for your age, 3-month-old baby, they're crying for a reason. That's their way of communicating. So go address that reason, and then you start creating bondings of comfort, bondings of nurturing, bondings of security, because I'm seeing the end of it. Or my 15-year-old, I want him to reach me. I mean, he's going to be in 3 years, he's going to be in college, but I want him to have the security to be like, you know, I don't care, it's 2 a.m, I'm going to call my mom, you know, because I need my mom. And I think sleep cueing is just a better way to go about when you have a 3-month-old to a toddler age, because that's just establishing more security and bonding with your babies. And not to say sleep is not important, because sleep definitely is important, and there's definite transitions part of it. Even at this age, my youngest is 6, my oldest is 15. We have quiet time in the afternoons where we go into the rooms, everybody gets a book, and they quiet their bodies. So that was initially when they were napping, but now it's turned into quiet time. Oh, and then there's sleep safety. So let's break that up. So do you guys have any comments about the sleep environment and the training and the cueing?
Well, I have 3 months of perspective, so not as much as you, Dr. Patel, but I definitely, it resonates what you're saying. With the cue versus training, I think there's definitely a balance, because, if you're so strict with just one right way, then maybe if you have to go out of town on a family vacation or whatever, you're just outside of the normal environment, then it might impact the baby negatively because it's just so used to that one specific way. We started being a little, you know, too much, I would say, with the apps and tracking the feeding and the sleeping and the napping. And then you gave us a different perspective, which you just shared right now. And since then, I think that as parents, we're a lot more laid back. We still have a routine, not as strict of a schedule as you said, right? If we have to do something during his nap time, he doesn't necessarily have to nap in the bassinet or, at home. He can sometimes nap more so like in the car and things like that. So we are trying to find our balance and our routine without being too strict, and also allowing us as parents to not be so under such a strict schedule and still allow us to kind of live our life, but definitely with a new routine now with a baby. So I would say, what I took away is just that balance. I think that, being too strict might be a little too much, but definitely a good routine is healthy. So when it comes to that, we're trying to find that balance. And like Megan said before, right? Just when you think you figured out the balance, then their schedule or their routine changes a little bit, which is also nice to have that adaptability instead of being too strict with what we're doing.
So for me, I have struggled every step of the way with sleep. When she was first little, I never understood the eat, play, sleep. I could never get it in that order, no matter how much I tried. My daughter seems to be a unicorn of that situation, and she just does her own thing and she beats to her own drum. Even when she was little, her wake windows were more like 3-4 hours versus 1 to 2 hours. Like, she just always seemed to do stuff differently. We did at one point, as Dr. Patel knows very well, try to hire a sleep trainer, who I promptly fired the night that I was supposed to start, because even though we had discussed at great length what me and my husband wanted for our daughter, this person slowly came in and started trying to change how we were going to do it, in a way that I wasn't comfortable with, such as taking my daughter's pacifier. I felt like at that point she had been used to sleeping in our room, so I felt like trying to take all those things at once was way too much, and I needed to do it in a way that I also felt comfortable doing it so I could reinforce it with her. I did take some things from the experience. We do let her sleep in her own crib in her own bedroom now. I do try to keep bedtime at the same time every night, nap time at the same night or same time every day, within about a half hour of reason. We have noticed if we don't stick to those times, we either don't get naps at all, or bedtime. It's really hard to get her down. So we do stick to that. We do, leading up to that, do kind of a routine, especially at night, of she gets to watch a little bit of, she loves the Muppets, so we let her watch the Muppets, and then we do teeth brushing and story time and snuggling and bedtime. So we do keep a bit of a routine, but for us, that just works for her and her busy little mind. but with safety, we do the crib, and right now, she's 16 months, so we have just started to introduce a blanket into the crib. And that's more at nap time when I can really watch her on the monitor with the blanket and make sure that everything is safe in there. Past that, we don't use any kind of bumpers, anything like that. The only bumper we did use at one point was a mesh one, so it was breathable. Mainly because she can literally turn a 360 and has since she was really little in her bed. So she was getting her legs and arms stuck in between the railing of the crib, and for me, I was paranoid that she'd break her arm or something getting it stuck in there. But we pretty much adhere to the safety rules. The only other thing that's in her crib is it's a harder kind of stuffed animal that lights up and it sings. Doesn't really present a lot of suffocation risk. Past that though, we adhere a lot to the safety rules when it comes to the crib. I'm still very paranoid of something happening with her. But I mean, we're doing pretty good so far, but like I said earlier, every time you think that you get used to it and think you've got something in place, they change. I've had her sleep trained, and as I would say, I guess at this point, um, for the last 4.5 months. And now, just recently, the last few days, she's not wanting to go down. She's struggling to take a nap. And it could be, other things with teeth and everything else. Those tend to mess with the sleep times, but it does change. And I think it's being flexible to work with it.
I think that's one thing that you mentioned that you articulated a little better than I did, was structure versus being so like, I mean, I know parents who would be like, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock. We need to go home right now, or we need to do this right this second, because otherwise it's going to mess up everything. And I just honestly, from looking in that way, it just didn't seem healthy to be like, if you're so rigid on that aspect of it, that you cannot just enjoy one evening, then how are your kids going to adjust when things are thrown at them? But I like the term structure a little better, because it's still not training, because you're not setting a particular time. You're not being like, okay, we have to do 10 steps first before we can actually have this bedtime routine and go to bed, because sometimes life happens and those things can be messed up. So you really do want to teach your kids, even with the sleep part of it, is to be able to adjust to things that happen to you, but hopefully in most normal circumstances have a good structure for it. So Megan, your little one reminds me of my oldest one. He never, like, I remember he was 9 months old, and I read in a book that he was supposed to get 2 naps still, and I literally had him in his crib and closed the door, and he was crying his head off. And my husband looked at me and he goes, "What are you doing to him? Like, why?" I was like, no. A book told me that I had to do this. And, that was literally the last of that. My husband was like, "No, we're not doing this." And he's like, "We're going to make sure that he gets appropriate sleep. But if we need to listen to our child as well, if he's telling us he doesn't want to do this." And those points in time are just change. So like what your toddler is going through right now is she's growing, she's changing, and there might be something else that needs for her. So with every sleep change, I know I did this too, is whenever they went down to one nap, or even if they dropped their naps completely, every third or fourth day, I would ensure that they had a nap, because then it would catch up to their body until they were over that transition. And when you start listening to your baby's cues.
I personally really appreciate you guys sharing those perspectives, because obviously you are 15 years or a few months ahead of me. So it was great to hear your guys's. We've been very lucky with our baby. Santi has been as soon as I think he was 2 months, he was sleeping 6, 7 hours through the night. And as a newborn, he was sleeping fairly often. So we felt like we got really lucky. And I'm looking into the future as to how things might change there. So thank you for sharing the perspective. And I'm now more prepared from this conversation to what comes next with a sleep journey.
It's a difficult one.
Or it could be totally easy. That's the thing with kids. They're so different. My second one, he loves to sleep and he still loves to sleep. It's my teenager will wake up at, let's say, 8 o'clock, 7:38 every single morning. He goes to bed at 10. And my 11-year-old will literally can sleep till 11 o'clock at night, though he goes to bed. 11 o'clock during the day, though he goes to bed at 8 o'clock. So again, I think what we're all kind of saying in a different way is there are some guidelines. There are some safety rules that we all follow. The safety about when to introduce things into the crib, when obviously, as Sandy mentioned, not to fall asleep with your babies and stuff. But all of those safety rules are there, and those are guidelines. But at the end of the day, the relationship comes between you and your child, and you have to figure out how you need to make sure that they're following the stuff that you're putting as guidelines, and also how to parent them appropriately. So, and then another thing, you'll see I have plenty of pictures where my little one fell asleep on my husband, but he was being supervised. I was awake sitting next to both of them while this was happening and while they were doing their bond. So it's okay to once in a while cuddle your baby, but make sure that they're supervised that way. So someone's supervising that interaction.
That is a great point. Yes, we do. I do let them cuddle when I'm able to supervise.
Yeah.
And those guidelines are priceless. Dr. Patel, and I'll also echo something that I really took away when you mentioned nap time going to quiet time. I think that's awesome, and I'm definitely going to try to do that when Santi's older. I think especially nowadays with how quickly life moves and how we're just stimulated 24/7, having a little bit of quiet time. Some people might call it meditation, reading, whatever you do. I think it's definitely important just to let the mind and the body relax, even if you're not fully napping. So I might try to do that myself.
Yes, I literally say my kids taught me how to take naps, and they will vouch for it. I can take a 10 to 15-minute nap every afternoon, and my oldest is like, "How do you do that?" I goes, "You guys trained me." Like I got trained the other way around. So, toddler age, Megan, what are you dealing with safety issues at a toddler age?
Well, the biggest thing is that my daughter, we always say that she's kind of like a dog. There's a movie where they say that dogs get to know each other by sniffing each other's butts, and we feel like my daughter gets to know everything by putting it in her mouth. Like it's how she figures out what it is, and so everything literally goes into my daughter's mouth at some point or another. So making sure everything is clean. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a bit of a germaphobe, so I am definitely the mom that is constantly cleaning toys, constantly making sure that things are picked up within reason. I've gotten to the point that if I don't want it in her mouth, it doesn't come even remotely close to her level. I have gone as far as to kind of keep her in a zone. So we have gates by our living room over our stairs. My bedroom is closed off almost all the time. The only time she's ever allowed in our bedroom is if we are in our bedroom. Her bedroom, for a while, we had an issue with how things were plugged in. My daughter loves to pull cords out of the wall. Is pretty obsessed with cords, really. So we actually had to block her off her room for a while until we could find a better solution for her cords. Now everything safety wise, my daughter is the challenger. She likes to definitely test her boundaries. We got the plastic stuff that it's like a tubing type stuff that sticks on the edges of corners that's supposed to protect them. The first thing my daughter did when she could reach for it was pull it off and chew on it. So that did not work very long, needless to say. Outlet covers, we had to get heavy duty ones because the plastic ones, she also figured out how to pull them out, and she just would love to try to sit there and put them back, and she loves trying to figure that kind of stuff out. So we had to get heavy duty ones that actually have like a little plastic key that helps you remove them because they stick in so well. Like I said, it's a lot of keeping doors shut, locks on cabinets, gates up, and nothing within realm. And now she's starting to climb. So we were comfortable with her going into the kitchen because when we were in there, we'd let her walk in there because she liked to play with the broom. But now we cannot do that because even with cabinets locked and the things put away, she has started crawling onto our dining room table and onto our chairs. And she'll push the chair to wherever she wants and crawl up that. So she's very crafty when she wants to be and when she wants to get something. So right now it's everything safety. I've got to constantly be watching her, and she learns something new every day and learns how to get into something new every day. So it's definitely a little bit of everything.
Santi, are you looking forward to that?
That's so interesting. I'm smiling, not at Megan's expense, but just looking forward to that. I was thinking Megan has a little electrical engineer on her hands with how interested she is there with cords and outlets. But yeah, I'm thinking, oh man, I got the plastic outlet covers, right? And all the other things that I've purchased that he'll probably figure out. But as with everything else, I think everybody has their own journey, and I'll have to come back and let you guys know how much my little guy figures out with all this safety protocols, how much he pushes the limits.
Mind you, most of the safety stuff that I got was recommended to me by several other moms. So I think for some it works. My daughter she's very ornery like her dad. So she likes to try to test her limits and figure out what she can get away with. So I think that's a big part of it.
Well, at least I know who to call if we have to move on to the heavy duty stuff.
I'll be here.
Megan, it seems like the more germaphobe you are and the more safety rules you follow, the more your daughter tries to break them.
Yeah, I've let up on the germaphobic part a little bit with her. She's taught me very much about being more relaxed about things. It's funny because she'll drop some when she first would drop stuff on the floor, I would clean it, I'd sanitize it. Now I'm like, it might be okay. Like, I mean, she'll find like a cookie or like a cracker that she's had on the floor, or like she has a little ball tent and sometimes like food ends up in there and she'll come out with it. And I'm like, well, you might have had that like yesterday, but okay, like I guess it's still food. Like I've learned to just kind of pick my battles with her. Like I can't freak out about everything because otherwise, I mean, my day will be intense. Like she loves to go through our cabinets. So I gave her like a cabinet that she can go through and she could play in. So there's little compromises there too.
Yeah. I mean, luckily the house that we moved into, the mom had covered all the outlets. And so now we're like trying to uncover some of them because now we actually use them. Our kids are a little bit older, but it's so funny that, you know, in the weirdest places you'll find an outlet cover. You're like, that's awesome. So the other things don't forget is for tubs, make sure that you're always monitoring your babies when you're giving baths, particularly, and then also when the summer comes, people really forget that the toddler walking age, the number one area where we see drowning is in pails and buckets, usually in the summers. Even a little kiddie pool is dangerous for that age of kids, just because you never, first of all, with the buckets, yes, if you ever seen the Home Depot buckets, they just kind of fall in, and that has actually happened. Make sure all the chemicals in the cabinets are closed. Just kind of reminded myself where the buckets usually are kept is where all the cleaning supplies are kept. So, and then obviously when they get a little older, pool safety is very important, but I think people don't recognize the fact that toddlers actually drown in smaller bodies of water, up to, I mean, as little as 2 to 3 inches of water. And we are more aware of them when they are in a pool or a larger body of water, but are kind of forget about that one. And when, however soon you can get them into swimming lessons, that's really, that's one place that I would spend my time and energy and money doing is swimming lessons, actually. So that's one of my takeaways. So, but now to my generation, right? To my generational kids and safety. And I think, Santi, we had kind of broached the subject last time and you were just like, oh, I didn't even think of this, is when so we have a rule in our house that we don't do sleepovers until kids are between 9 and 10. So we don't do sleepovers below that. And it's also kind of depends when and who. So that's the other thing too, is like we need to know this family really well. They can't just be a random, like I just met this person and a taekwondo and now I want to go do a sleepover. You know, we've got to have known the family for a while, definitely through school and everything like that helps. And one of the questions we ask is about gun safety. And I just remember walking that line, I was like, oh my God, I've got to ask about gun safety. And just like you, Santi, I don't like confrontation. I don't like I don't like to hear, or I don't want to hear the things I don't want to hear either, because that leads to a different line. But luckily, most of the people that we interacted with initially when the kids were a little bit younger, they did not have guns, and we did come and ask them, and a lot of parents were very open to the question and very understanding. So that actually was really helpful, because then you knew they were on the same values as you. And then now, as they've gone older, we do have some friends who have guns. They have BB guns, and but you know, I know the safeties for that, and handguns and stuff. But I am very comfortable saying, okay, that's great. My son's coming over for even a simple play date. My oldest 11-year-old just went for a play date where they actually have guns, and he shot a couple of BB guns on the farm and everything. And I was fully aware of that. And I was like, okay, but it was that asking those questions. And guns are such a trigger point in our society that when I was asking it, initially, I was very reluctant, but then I realized, well, if something happened to my child and I didn't ask this question, I would never forgive myself. And more, just keep asking it. I mean, you ask it on, I remember coming to both of you guys when I did you guys' home visits. I asked you right away. I was like, and one of my questions was like, okay, do you guys own any guns? Where are they kept? And I've learned over time to have more of that as a natural conversation rather than it's a triggering conversation, because the way I approach it now, it's like, I'm just going to ask, you know, and I get comfortable asking it.
I just want to say thank you for sharing all those perspectives. Obviously, they're not something I've experienced firsthand before. Not only sharing that, but also I think after every subject that we've touched on, you've added great facts there regarding car seat safety, vaccines, sleeping safety. So just thank you for sharing that perspective. It's eye-opening to hear what's coming next and what tough conversations to get used to, because it's a lot easier when you have time to at least mentally prepare about having these conversations, both with friends, family, as well as with your kids directly. So just thank you for sharing that and opening up that perspective for me.
Oh, you're welcome. I think there was one thing I read very long ago, and we can kind of end on this and Megan's last words also, but I'll tell you. So I read somewhere when I was having my first, so about 16 years ago, that it's actually the kids aren't afraid to receive information. It's the parents are hesitant to give the information because they're not comfortable talking about it. So I remember when my baby was 1 month old, I told him smoking is bad. Smoking is bad. Do not smoke, do not do alcohol. I kept just repeating it off and on. I would do that through his childhood because I got comfortable saying it. And fast forward, when he was 10 years old, and we were all in the car and he saw some guy on the side of the street. He was in a wheelchair and he was smoking, and he turned to his brothers and he said, "That's what happens when you smoke." And I was just like, I did my job, you know? So I still remember 2-3 months, smoking is bad, smoking, you know, because you got comfortable talking about those conversations. I mean, one conversation we didn't even talk about was sex education and the safety that goes around that. But I think that's a whole nother hour discussion. But there's a lot of stuff that comes on when you start diving into, and when they start getting older. And I really want, the last piece of advice is get comfortable having the conversations on your end, because it's not the kids don't want to receive the information, it's how you present it to them. That's going to really help.
It's a great point.
I completely agree. I think it's being comfortable to have those conversations and being open. My parents were always pretty open with me about things. And I think in turn, I felt for the most part comfortable being more open about things with my parents than most of my friends did growing up. But when it comes to the safety, I think we just have to lead with what we think's comfortable for us. As you said, like those gun conversations, vaccine conversations, all of it has to be what we feel comfortable with for keeping our kids safe. As I've said before, it ultimately comes down to us to keep our kids safe, and we can't leave that responsibility to anybody else. And when they're so young, especially, they don't have the choice to make those decisions.
Well, thank you guys so much. Once again, this was amazing. Anything I've missed?
I think that pretty well covers it.
Yeah, I think so too. So again, thank you, Santi, so much for bringing the dad's perspective. I just enjoy it so much. And I think it's so valuable for people to hear what dads are going through as well. So it's totally indebted to and appreciate everything that you have put the time and effort to do for us too.
Yes, thank you.
Right back at you guys. Thank you guys so much for giving us the platform and for inviting me to be here. I think that there's definitely a lot of dads that would like to speak up, but they're just never given the opportunity or platform to do so. So right back at you guys. Thank you for everything you're doing and for allowing me to be a part of it.
Well, on that note, thank you everyone, and we will end the conversation on safety. Thank you.